Good to have you back, continuing to bring home lessons of Homeland Security and national security to you. We're talking with Alyssa Stephens, who's our Director of Operations for the Integrative Center for Homeland Security. Alyssa, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You join us to talk about just one thing from time to time, and that one thing today is?
Today's one thing is the Country Reports on Terrorism for 2008. This is a report submitted by the U.S. Department of State. It's conducted by the National Counterterrorism Center. And basically this is over 500 of the counterterrorism experts from the intelligence community.
To take a look at this. So the Country Reports on Terrorism comes out each year by Department of State. And what sorts of things does this tell us? Does it walk us around the world? What does this report tell us?
Yes, it does. It actually analyzes the terrorism trends from many of the different countries around the world, those with the greatest terrorism capabilities, threats. It analyzes all of those.
Well, one of the problems is always the definition of terrorism. So I know they use a definition out of U.S. law that talks about attacks on innocents for political purposes. Because there are some acts that may be heinous acts, but they aren't necessarily terrorist acts.
Right, that's correct. As in, there was an example recently where I believe it was in Iraq, a soccer coach was fired, and to retaliate, he poisoned children's cakes. And that wasn't considered a terrorist act, but it was still a criminal act.
Still a criminal act.
Right.
Or drug violence in Mexico. Is that considered terrorist under terrorist activity for this report?
No, it's not classified as terrorist activity. It doesn't threaten directly U.S. national security or nationals with a legitimate terrorist act.
And that would be, the people that do that are called what? Foreign terrorist organizations?
They're called foreign terrorist organizations, and to get this title, they have to be monitored and designated, and a report is written up by the State Department to analyze all the different aspects of why they are considered.
And you mentioned a good deal of that analysis is done by the National Counterterrorism Center.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, let's walk around and tell us what things really did get your attention. Just very briefly, we're going to direct our listeners to the report here in just a minute. But what got your attention out of this report?
Okay. Well, as has been the case for a few years, Al-Qaeda continues to be the greatest threat to the United States. They are losing ground. They've been moving out. They've been headed towards Pakistan, pushed out to different areas, as they're losing a lot of the support they once had in those areas. However, the Taliban and other smaller extremist groups are gaining ground. They're kind of filling in this vacuum that was left by Al-Qaeda. They control parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and suicide attacks have risen steadily in these areas.
Suicide attacks are up.
Yes, in these areas particularly. In other areas of the world, they've gone down.
Very quickly, what about WMD? Is there any evidence of that reason we should be concerned about that?
There is slightly. There's always issue of WMDs, but particularly in Iraq, I believe it was recently, they found an abandoned biological lab where they'd been working on constructing these biological weapons.
The title of that report is?
This is Country Reports on Terrorism 2008.
Country Reports on Terrorism by the Department of State. You can find it online at the Department of State website. Thanks for being with us on Bring It Home.